Okay, continuing with our study of genetics, we're now going to look at non-Mendelian inheritance. Remember the three allele combinations that we've discussed so far. We know that we have homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and heterozygous. Those are following the law of dominance. If you look at the three allele combinations, homozygous dominant and heterozygous, in both of those situations, the dominant characteristic or dominant trait is going to show in the phenotype. There are other types of inheritance patterns that are non-Mendelian. Gregory Mendel and his work with pea plants, he studied the inheritance of traits in pea plants, developed the law of inheritance, disproved the theory of blended inheritance. However, the phenotype of a heterozygous organism can be a blend of phenotypes of its homozygous parents. That's going to allow us to go into our next topics of covering blended inheritance, which are known as incomplete dominance, codominance, and polygenetic inheritance. Let's start first with incomplete dominance. Incomplete dominance is expressed when a heterozygous phenotype exhibits a blend of the two alleles it possesses. Neither allele has complete dominance over the other, which results in a third phenotype. Remember, phenotype is physically what we're able to see. The most common example is the inheritance in a snapdragon flower, looking at the colors. Notice we have a red snapdragon, a white snapdragon, and then a pink snapdragon. Okay, let's take a look at incomplete dominance example. We have a red colored flower, and we're going to represent the color with the letter C, and then we're going to put, looks like a power, the R, which is going to represent red. So we know that one of our snapdragons is going to be a red color. And then we're going to cross that with a white colored flower. Again, the C is representing the color. And then what specific color we're looking at is the W for white. Using Mendel's laws of segregation and independent assortment to identify the gametes for our Punnett square. So again, we know that one of our parents is going to be red. So our gametes, when we separate those into individuals. And then we have our two gametes for our white colored flower. And then you'd still fill in your Punnett square the same way that we normally do. We're just now indicating that we're specifically looking at colors. As we take a look at this, we have our four flowers that are represented, all with a color of W for white and R for red. So we're looking at four heterozygous genotypes. Because we have the white and red together and one is not dominant over the other, we're going to get a blend of them. This is what's going to give us four pink flowers for the phenotype. It's a blend of the red and white flowers. Again, incomplete dominance. It's not complete one color over another. It's incomplete, meaning you're going to get a blend of the two. What are the possible phenotypes if heterozygous snapdragons are crossed? By heterozygous snapdragons, then you're looking at a white and a red that are going to be bred together. So if you would pause the video and just on the side of your notes, would you complete a Punnett square that's showing two heterozygous snapdragons being crossed? Okay, hopefully you've completed your Punnett square. Again, we were crossing two snapdragons that were going to be heterozygous, so we know that we were going to have the color was going to be pink for both of them because it's incomplete dominance for both parents. And they told us that it was heterozygous, so we know that we're representing the white and the red together. It's going to blend together, giving us the pink. So when you complete your Punnett square, our gametes for each parent. That's going to represent a white flower. That would give us a pink flower. That's a second pink flower. And then our last one would be a red flower. So if I crossed two heterozygous snapdragons, I would end up with one red, one white, and two pink. Okay, pedigrees are family trees which show the parents and offspring across generations, as well as who possessed a particular trait. So far, we have only looked at pedigrees that have had completely filled in shapes for organisms that exhibit a trait, and empty shapes for organisms that do not exhibit a trait. Pedigrees can also give us more detailed information. If we have a half-filled shape, that's going to indicate that we have a heterozygous. So as we take a look at this pedigree, let me grab my pen. We want to know what are the phenotypes, remember phenotype is physically what we could see, of the offspring in the F1 generation. Well, the F1 generation is actually represented here. The offspring is going to be number 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are the offspring from these. This is not, number 6 is not one of the offspring. Number 6 is actually mating with number 5. So we're just looking at 2, 3, 4, and 5. 2 and 3 are completely colored in. They are going to represent red snapdragons. And then 4 and 5 are only partially colored in. So we know they're not red, we know they're not white. This is incomplete dominance. We're looking at 2 pink snapdragons. So 4 and 5 would be pink snapdragons. Now looking at codominance. Codominance is expressed as a heterozygous phenotype with both alleles being displayed at the same time. Remember, incomplete blended gave us a whole new phenotype altogether. But in codominance, like co-workers, they're together, we're going to see both of them. Neither allele has dominance over the other, but are not blended, and both are fully and separately expressed, which is going to again give us a third type of phenotype. Here we're going to see the camellia flower. We're representing red and white showing at the exact same time. It's not blending to give us pink. Okay, the blended, remember, was incomplete dominance. Codominance, like co-workers, they show up together. Both are going to be represented, the red and the white. Okay, continuing with codominance. Again, codominance, we're going to see both traits together. We have a red colored flower. It's represented with 2 capital R's. is crossed with a white colored flower represented with two capital W's. They're both dominant traits, but in codominance, one's not going to have dominant over the other. We're going to have both of those colors being represented. If we were to look at the possible genotypes and phenotypes for the offspring, we need to first complete our Punnett square. We've got to set up our gametes, separating out our red alleles and our white alleles. And then we fill in our Punnett square. Using the laws of segregation and independent assortment, we can fill in our Punnett square, and we'll see that we have R and W both being represented. Again, these are going to be co-dominant. They're like co-workers. They both show up together. So we're seeing red and white represented in our flower. So our genotype are 4 heterozygous, RW. Remember, genotype are the genes. And then the phenotype is physically, what are we seeing? We are seeing that the 4 red and white flowers, okay, both red and white are going to be expressed together. Both are visible for us to see them as codominants. So what are the possible phenotypes if 2 heterozygous camellia flowers are going to be crossed? So you're going to have 2 heterozygous, so red and white are both going to be represented. If you would pause the video for a second and complete that Punnett square. Okay, hopefully you guys have finished your Punnett square. Again, we were crossing in codominance, heterozygous. Let me grab a pen. So we know that we had codominance of red and white for both parents. When you complete your Punnett square, separate out your gametes for both parents, and then that would represent a red flower. That would represent a codominant, red and white both showing in the same flower. Again, this one would also show a red and white flower showing together. And then this last one would represent just a white flower. So when we look at our phenotypes, we would have 1 red, 1 white, and 2 that are red and white together. The pedigree below, it's looking at the family genetics of 2 organisms that mate, and it shows the genetic information from each organism. If the pedigree to the left represented the camellia flower codominants, what are the phenotypes of the parents of the organisms that mated? So what we're looking at are these are the ones that mated. They gave us this offspring, but we want to know the phenotypes of their parents. So first, starting with the male, we want to know the phenotype of the parents for that particular flower. So the dad, okay, the father for this one was going to represent a white flower. If it's not colored in, it's white. And then the mom was going to represent a white and red codominants together. Then when we look at the female, okay, so now we're on this side, starting with the dad is going to represent white and red codominants together. And then the mom would represent just a white flower. A third type of inheritance is polygenetic inheritance. Poly, remember, means more than one, means many, meaning multiple genes are responsible for contributing to the overall phenotype. It allows for more than 2 or 3 variations to be expressed in a phenotype. An example would be skin color. We know that skin color can range from a very light shade to a very dark shade. At least 378 genes are involved in determining skin color. Another example of polygenetic inheritance is a fingerprint. Fingerprints come from 7 genes. When you look at the Punnett square for a polygenetic inheritance, they can get quite complicated. A lot of data can be gathered from them, but they are very involved. You'll be happy to know that you are not going to complete polygenetic inheritance Punnett squares. What you guys need to know is that poly means multiple, in other words, multiple genes involved, and that 2 examples are fingerprints and skin color. So we know that phenotypes can be affected by incomplete dominance. Remember, incomplete dominance is when we have a blend of traits combining together to give us our phenotype. We know that there's codominance that can affect phenotypes. Codominance, like coworkers, they can both be present together at the same time. Polygenetic traits are when you have multiple genes that are going to be responsible for determining the phenotype. And in order to look at all of those different types of inheritance, we're still using Mendel's laws, which we would need to be able to complete the Punnett squares.